5 disturbing details that don't match the official story. Some stories are troubling enough on their own, but what makes them even more disturbing is when the official details don't quite add up, raising lingering questions about whether we are being told the whole truth. In this video, we will look at 5 cases that challenge the accepted narrative. So hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. Oklahoma City bombing. On April 19, 1995, a truck bomb detonated outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people, including 19 children, and injuring hundreds more. It was the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in US history at the time. Within 90 minutes of the explosion, an Oklahoma State trooper stopped a yellow Mercury Marquis for a missing license plate and arrested the driver, who turned out to be Timothy McVeigh. What initially appeared to be a routine traffic stop quickly unraveled into one of the most significant criminal investigations in American history. McVeigh, a Gulf War veteran, had been radicalized by extremist anti-government ideology. He was particularly enraged by federal actions at Ruby Ridge in 1992 and the Waco siege in 1993, and the bombing was deliberately carried out on the 2nd anniversary of the end of the Waco standoff. In court, prosecutors demonstrated that McVeigh constructed a massive ammonium nitrate fuel oil bomb with assistance from his longtime associate Terry Nichols. Nichols helped acquire materials and prepare components of the device. A third associate, Michael Fortier, knew about the plot in advance and later testified against them. The official case concluded that McVeigh and Nichols operated within a small, isolated group, influenced by literature from white supremacist and anti-government extremists, including the Turner Diaries. McVeigh was convicted in 1997 and executed in 2001, and Nichols received multiple life sentences without parole. However, despite the convictions, the case has remained the subject of lingering questions. In the immediate aftermath of the bombing, law enforcement agencies publicly referenced a possible additional suspect labeled John Doe No. 2. Composite sketches were circulated, and many witnesses believed they had seen McVeigh with another unidentified man, who was not Terry Nichols. He was described as 5'9" to 5'10", 175 pounds, with brown hair and a tattoo on his left arm. The public were warned that he may be armed and should be considered extremely dangerous. However, ultimately federal authorities concluded that John Doe No. 2 was actually an Army private named Todd Bunting, who had no connection to McVeigh or the bombing, but had visited Elliott's body shop approximately 24 hours after McVeigh rented the Ryder truck used in the bombing. Bunting later refused all interview requests. However, the early public mention of another suspect raised doubt and suggested that a larger network might be involved, with the unpunished conspirators still at large. It was also puzzling to many that a man who was frequently seen by numerous witnesses before the bombing, and who was described in detail, could be so easily overlooked by investigators. There were also claims that certain investigative leads were not fully pursued, including potential connections to extremist groups, and some critics pointed to reports of surveillance tapes from nearby buildings that were never publicly released, arguing that gaps in publicly available footage left room for speculation. Others raised concerns about whether informants within militia movements had prior knowledge of events that went unaddressed. Official reviews and later reports found no verified evidence of a broader operational conspiracy beyond those who were charged. However, the feeling that not every detail was publicly addressed fueled an ongoing debate, and decades later, there is still lingering doubt about the existence of John Doe No. 2, who some believe may have been present and could still be at large. Apollo 1. On January 27, 1967, a routine pre-launch test at Cape Kennedy's Launch Complex 34 ended in tragedy when a fire broke out in the Apollo 1 command module. The fire killed astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee. This test, called a plugs-out simulation, aimed to practice countdown procedures with the spacecraft powered on its own. The Saturn I rocket under the capsule was not fueled, and the test was considered low risk. Within moments of the fire starting, flames spread quickly through the pure oxygen atmosphere inside the capsule. The crew tried desperately to open the hatch, but were overwhelmed by smoke and heat. Sadly, all 3 astronauts died from asphyxiation due to toxic gases. After the fire, NASA came under heavy scrutiny. At that time, the US was deep in the Cold War space race, competing with the Soviet Union to land a human on the moon before the decade ended. Publicly, NASA acknowledged it was a tragic accident, but initially could not explain how such a severe fire could happen on the ground. The official investigation found that faulty electrical wiring was likely the cause of the ignition. The command module had miles of wiring, Velcro, nylon nets, and other flammable materials, and in a cabin filled with pure oxygen, even a tiny spark could lead to an explosion. The design of the hatch became a major point of controversy. The command module featured a 3-layer hatch that opened inward. During the test, the cabin was pressurized, sealing the hatch shut once the fire began. This made it impossible to open quickly, essentially trapping the astronauts inside. They perished within seconds. NASA engineers had discussed the hatch design before the accident, but accepted the inward opening design as safe for space travel. After the fire, critics argued that this design placed too much emphasis on the schedule and not enough on safety. There were also wider issues about management culture within NASA and its contractors. The Apollo program faced immense pressure to meet President John F. Kennedy's goal of landing on the moon. Later testimonies revealed breakdowns in communication among engineers and contractors, and some engineers had raised concerns about the quality of workmanship and wiring before the test. Grissom himself had noted ongoing technical problems with the spacecraft. While there was no evidence that NASA ignored any specific fire hazard, the investigation found that design flaws, inadequate procedures, and lapses in oversight created a situation where this tragedy could occur. Unlike other disasters where later accounts change, the Apollo 1 investigation did not uncover a hidden cause years later. Instead, the initial uncertainty led to a major redesign. NASA removed the pure oxygen environment during ground tests, eliminated flammable materials, improved wiring standards, and switched to a quick-release, outward-opening hatch that could be opened quickly, and the command module received extensive updates before flights resumed. The impact of the Apollo 1 fire on the space program was significant. NASA paused crewed missions for 20 months to make safety improvements, and when Apollo flights resumed in late 1968, the redesigned spacecraft reflected important lessons learned from this tragedy. Conspiracy theorists dismiss this explanation entirely, arguing that the cabin fire was not an accident. Instead, they claim it was either a staged event or a deliberate cover-up intended to conceal the overwhelming technical failures that could not be resolved in time to beat the Soviet Union to the moon. And in the end, they claim NASA resorted to faking the moon landings. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 Disappearance. In the early hours of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing 777, operated by Malaysia Airlines, departed Kuala Lumpur, bound for Beijing with 239 people on board. Less than an hour into the flight, after routine communication with Malaysian air traffic control, and just as the aircraft was transitioning into Vietnamese airspace, its transponder stopped transmitting. The aircraft disappeared from civilian radar screens shortly afterwards. No distress call was made. Military radar later indicated that the aircraft had turned back across the Malay Peninsula and flown northwest before vanishing from radar coverage. For days, confusion surrounded the search area, and initial efforts focused on the South China Sea before authorities acknowledged the plane had likely deviated significantly from its original route and admitted they were searching in the wrong area. As investigators examined satellite data from Inmarsat, a British telecommunications company, they determined that automated handshake signals between the aircraft and a satellite continued for hours after contact was lost. Analysis of those signals suggested the aircraft flew south into the remote southern Indian Ocean. The official assessment, supported by Malaysia's Safety Investigation Report, concluded that the aircraft was intentionally diverted and continued flying until fuel exhaustion, ultimately crashing into the ocean. The report did not determine with certainty who was responsible for the diversion. While the captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, was scrutinized and simulated data recovered from his home showed a route broadly consistent with the southern trajectory. Investigators stated they found no conclusive evidence proving motive or definitive pilot action beyond the available flight path analysis. The disappearance became one of the largest and most expensive search operations in aviation history. Multinational efforts scanned vast sections of the Indian Ocean seafloor, using sonar mapping and underwater vehicles. However, despite years of searching, the main wreckage has never been located. In 2015, debris was discovered, including a flaperon found on Réunion Island and other parts that washed ashore along coastlines of the Western Indian Ocean. Forensic analysis definitively linked these fragments to MH370, confirming that the aircraft ended up in the ocean. In 2018, a private search company called Ocean Infinity conducted an additional search of the seabed under a no-find, no-fee agreement with the Malaysian government. However, they were unable to locate the wreckage. But public uncertainty continues to linger, partly due to early miscommunication from authorities and changes in search areas, and the unprecedented nature of a modern jetliner disappearing without a trace, fueled various speculations, including mechanical failure, hijacking, military shootdowns, or hidden landings at remote airstrips. However, no credible evidence has emerged to support any of these theories, and independent reviews of radar data, satellite information, and debris findings consistently conclude that the aircraft likely ended its journey in the southern Indian Ocean. More than a decade later, even with advances in technology, the wreckage of MH370 hasn't been located and remains one of aviation's most haunting mysteries. Jeffrey Epstein's death. Jeffrey Epstein was a financier who moved in elite social and political circles for decades, before facing serious criminal charges related to the sexual exploitation of minors. In 2008, he reached a controversial non-prosecution agreement in Florida that allowed him to plead guilty to state charges and serve a short jail sentence with work release privileges. That agreement, later widely criticized, shielded him from more severe federal prosecution at the time and fueled long-standing suspicions about preferential treatment. In July 2019, federal prosecutors in New York charged Epstein with sex trafficking of minors. He was arrested and detained at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. The case attracted intense public attention due to Epstein's associations with prominent figures across politics, business, and entertainment. The arrest raised expectations that further revelations might emerge about his network and potential co-conspirators. On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell and was later pronounced dead. The New York City Medical Examiner ruled the death as suicide by hanging. The official conclusion, supported by the US Department of Justice, was that Epstein died by suicide while awaiting trial. However, the circumstances surrounding his death generated immediate controversy. In the weeks prior, Epstein had reportedly been placed on suicide watch after an earlier incident, then later removed from it. On the night of his death, guards assigned to monitor him failed to perform regular checks and later admitted to falsifying records. 2 security cameras near his cell malfunctioned. Subsequent investigations by the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General in 2023 concluded that while there were numerous serious lapses and negligence within the facility, there was no evidence of homicide or a broader conspiracy to kill Epstein. The report criticized the Bureau of Prisons for chronic staffing shortages, inadequate training, and policy violations, but reaffirmed the suicide determination. Independent forensic pathologists, consulted by Epstein's family, questioned aspects of the autopsy findings, which further fueled debate, though no official reclassification of the manner of death occurred. However, there is a growing number of people who believe Epstein was murdered to protect his elite associates, and it seems with good reason. Since the release of nearly 3 million files relating to Epstein and his associates, it seems some of the most high-profile people in the world were mixed up in his murky world. In an unprecedented move, the former Prince Andrew, was dramatically arrested on March 19th on suspicion of misconduct in public office after it was revealed he may have shared sensitive government documents and commercial information with Epstein. Other powerful people associated with Epstein have been forced to quit their jobs or live in exile. The files have also revealed redacted images of Epstein after he was found hanged in his jail cell. 3 other photos have notes indicating they were captured at a hospital. They show a close-up of his head and a visible injury on his neck. Interestingly, his first name is misspelled as Jeffrey instead of Jeffrey in some of the images. Other documents reveal a meeting with a psychologist on July 24, 2019, in which Epstein stated that he had no interest in killing himself and that it would be crazy to take his own life. On July 25th, he said he was too vested in my case to fight it, emphasizing that he had a life and wanted to return to living it. Make of that what you will, but it seems to strengthen the case against Epstein taking his own life, and with more revelations set to be revealed in the coming days, we might finally find out the truth. In fact, some people think Epstein is still alive and living in Israel, although we think that may be a stretch. Miami Alien Mall Incident. On New Year's Day 2024, Bayside Marketplace in Miami became the epicenter of alien rumors, with videos and social media posts sparking widespread speculation and conspiracies about a cover-up. While the story has never been officially confirmed, the true nature of what happened that day continues to spark interest. On January 1st, Bayside Marketplace in Miami became chaotic when a large group of teenagers got into a violent altercation. The fight erupted shortly before 8:30 p.m., with the teenagers reportedly setting off loud fireworks. This caused some bystanders to mistakenly believe the sounds were gunfire, triggering fears of an active shooter situation. Police arrived in numbers, some heavily armed, and approached the crowd with high-powered rifles under the belief they were responding to a shooting incident. Videos of the extensive police presence, showing dozens of officers, were soon posted on social media. In the hours following the incident, blurry videos capturing the altercation quickly spread across social media platforms, and viewers soon noticed a strange anomaly in some of the footage. As interest in the videos grew, users began speculating that the incident might be connected to extraterrestrial phenomena. Eyewitnesses started reporting unsettling encounters with shadowy figures ranging from 8 to 10 feet tall, moving silently through the area. Additionally, many individuals claimed to have seen unusual lights flickering near the marketplace, which further fueled theories about otherworldly visitors. Videos posted to X clearly showed a being walking along the side of a building. Take a look. This footage sparked a frenzy on social media, leading to the trending of hashtags like #MiamiMallAliens. Rumors spread, with many pointing out that the police response seemed disproportionate to the situation, with videos showing hundreds of police officers and dozens of Miami Police Department cars lining the streets. Some even claimed that Miami Airport had been shut down. In the days that followed, social media was filled with conspiracy theories, the most popular of which suggested alien involvement, implying that something more significant had triggered such a substantial police response. There were even police helicopters checking out the area, and more than one person in the area at the time had their phones checked. But perhaps the strangest thing was the U-turn of a man who was visiting the mall from out of town, who posted a video account of events to social media, insisting the scene looked like a Hollywood movie. He later followed up his post with a totally different tone, going back on what he initially said, prompting people to think he had been intimidated into keeping silent. As the stories spread, the Miami police were quick to shut down the speculation, and in a social media post clarified that there was no truth to the rumors, saying nothing is being withheld from the public, no aliens, UFOs, or extraterrestrials, no airports were closed, and there were no power outages. The release of clearer footage indicated that the figures were likely police officers or shadows. However, witnesses and truth seekers were skeptical of the official narrative and believed there was a cover-up regarding what really happened that day. What do you think? Stay safe everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It really goes a long way. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.